No. In the last video, cut the last, I think it's said it was finished recording, but cut like 12 minutes off. I have a feeling it's more of the tower itself, the computer, is pushing the memory and its capabilities to the max. So it's having a little issues trying to keep up. I have a feeling that there's no questions on the homework, so I think most everybody got it turned in. Now, what we're looking at today is going to be very similar to yesterday because it's still dealing with factoring. The main difference is that when we factor it, a is not going to be 1. So if we look at this here, 7x squared, 31x, and 20, it'd be good to do with our first step, which is to find the greatest common factor between these three terms. Well, is there a greatest common factor between these three? Well, no. 7's prime, so if we're going to have a greatest common factor, the other two would have to be divisible by 7. Well, we could try to see if 31 is, but we know 20 is not. So there's not a greatest common factor between these three terms, so we can go on and do our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. And we can find the signs. And when we find the sign, we're really looking at the third term. Since here the third term is negative, our signs are going to be opposite, different. One of them is going to be positive, the other is going to be negative. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Now 7x squared, well, the factors of x squared are x and x, because there's only one set of factors for x squared. Now, as I just said a minute ago, 7 is prime, so well, there's only one set of factors for 7. 1 and 7, or 7 and 1, either one. So really, there are only one set of factors for either term, the first or third term, we're just going to go on and plug them in. Only one set, one way they can be put. Any questions on this so far? Now we need to look at the factors of 20. Well, that's 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Which ones do we want to try first? Which one do we want to put first? Because it doesn't really matter because, again, our last step is going to be to check. Now, 7x times negative 5 is going to be negative 35x. 4 times x is going to be plus 4x. Negative 35x plus 4x is going to be negative. Is that the middle term we wanted? So this here is the correct answer. Any questions on this here? Now with the homework, it would be nice to know if it is factorable or if it's not. Well, one way that we can actually figure this out is the square root of b squared minus 4ac. This will kind of help us to know if it is factorable. Because if this comes out to be a whole number, then it is going to be factorable. And we could even see it with this one here. The numbers are actually going to be quite large. As for this here, we would take the square root of negative 31 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 20. And at this point here, we could plug it in either calculator. Because we're not too focused on the value, we're just trying to see, is it a whole number or is it a fraction or decimal? Because if it works out to be a fraction or decimal, then it does not factor. 31 squared minus 4 times, and it works out to be 39. So if we plug it into either one and get anything besides a whole number, so we get an answer with I or a decimal, or for the yellow calculators, a domain error or a answer with a radical, we know that it's not going to be factorable. And you all know where this came from? Our negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Because if this is something that's not a whole number, well, it's not going to work out. It'll be whole number answers. Because we need whole number answers to be able to factor. Because if it's factorable, we get whole number answers, or fractional, because this would be fractional. All right, let's look at the next one here. 2b squared plus 17b plus 21. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? No. So we can move on to our two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Now to find the signs, we look at the constant term. Here the constant term is positive, so the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which is also positive. So we have positive and positive. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. So we need to find the factors of 2b squared. Well, the factors of 2 are 2 and 1. The factors of b squared are b and b. Well, so we'll have b and b, and then we can just say 2 and 1. Because there's only one set of factors, there's only one way that we can have this. We'll just throw it in. Factors of 21. 1 and 21, 3 and 7. Which one do we want to try first? 3 and 7. Which one do we want to put first? 3, 7. And last but not least, we can check it. 2b times 7 is 14b. And 3 times b would be plus 3b, which gives us 17b. That's exactly what we wanted, so these are the factors here. Any questions on any of this here? Yeah. Feel good with this here? All right, let's look at the next one. 7x squared minus 45x minus 28. All right. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Yes. 7 and 28 do have a greatest common factor of 7, yes? 45 is not divisible by 7. So there is a common factor between 7 and 28, but not with 45. So move on to two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Now we can look at the signs. So we look at the third term. Since it's negative, the signs are opposite. One is going to be positive and one is going to be negative. Now 7x squared, 7 we said is prime. So we really just have 7 and 1, and then we'll also have x and x. Okay. And the factors of 28 are going to be, well, we have a few for 28. We have 1 and 28, 2 and 14. 3 doesn't work. 4 and 7. 5 doesn't work because it doesn't end in 0 or 5. And we know 6 won't work because 2 and 3 are both are not factors. 2 is, but 3 is not. Which one do we want to try first? So 4 and 7, which one do we want to put first? It would be 4. I'm going to put 7 first here, just to kind of make an example. Because if I put 7 first, in that first set of parentheses, 7x plus 7, is there a greatest common factor? Yes, there's a greatest common factor of 7. But at the start, we said that there is none. And if there's not a greatest common factor to begin with, there cannot be one in either set of parentheses. So that tells us that 7 can't go here. But we can put 4, because 4 and 7 don't have a greatest common factor. X and 7 don't have one. So this could work. We just need to check to make sure. So we can do 7x times negative 7, which would be negative 49x. 4 times x is going to be plus, which gives us negative. Is that what we wanted? Yep. So that is it there. Any questions on this here? We need to see another example of one like this here. Y'all feel pretty comfortable with this? Yes? Okay. Do we want to look at this one here or this one here? Or do y'all feel comfortable with these here? Feel comfortable? Okay. Let's look at this one here. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? There is. Four. Yeah. 4 will. Anything else? Because is there at least 2 variables in all 3 terms? Because the first one's into the fourth, the next one's in cubed, and the last one is in squared. They all have a variable. More specifically, they all have 2. Because the first one into the fourth has 4 of them, the next one has 3, and the last one has 2. So we can remove 2 of those from each. We can not only pull out a number, but we can also pull out a variable if there is in common, if there's one in common. And here, when we factor it out, we're dividing it by 4n squared. Well, 28 divided by 4 is 7. And into the fourth divided by n squared is n squared. And whenever we divide like terms or like variables, we subtract the exponents. Now the next one, 16n cubed divided by 4n squared. Well, 16 divided by 4 is 4. N cubed divided by n squared is n minus. 80 divided by 4 is 20. And n squared divided by n squared would simplify to 1. So it's really saying that 20 times 1, which is just going to be 20. So what we have is 4n squared. Now we can have our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Looking at the third term, since it's negative, our signs are opposite. One's going to be positive, one is going to be negative. Now with 7n squared, well, we'll have 7n and n. Because 7's prime, so the only factors are 7 and 1. In n squared, only real factors are n and n. Factors of 20. Well, 1 and 20. 2 and 10. 4 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 10? Okay. Okay, so let's try flipping 10 and 2 first. And if we do this here, well, 7n times negative 2 would be negative 10 times n is plus 10n, which gives us a negative 4n. We just need to change the sign because we got the correct number but wrong sign. So if we do this again, 7n times 2 would give us 14n minus 10n, which would give us a positive 4n. And this here would be our answer. Any questions on any of this here? Mm-hmm. It could, or it could be the other way around if it's negative. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most likely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a lot of what we do with these factoring here, if you find patterns that work, use them. And again, the big thing at the end is we check. So if you did end up finding a case where it didn't work out, when we checked it, it would tell us yes, okay, it needs to be flipped. But most likely, yeah. Because we would get the sign change, because from that being multiplied with the positive over here would make the bigger one positive. Yeah. Any other questions on this here? Do we need to see another example of one of these? Feel comfortable with this? This one? Okay. So let's look at this one here. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Well, we do have a common factor of b. Because 3 would go into 30 and 30. 87, if it is divisible by 3, the sum of its digits would be also. Well, 8 plus 7 is 15, and 15 is divisible by 3, so it does work. So we can divide each one of these by 3b. Well, 30 divided by 3 would be 10. N squared, because we didn't do anything with n, and b divided by b would be 1. Really, we're just going to pull b out of every single one. Minus 87 divided by 3 would be 9 n plus 10. Now, since that is the only greatest common factor, we can do our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since the 10 is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which would be negative and negative. Well, the factors for 10 are 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Now we do know the factors for n squared are going to give us n and n. So I go on and put those in. Now for the 10 part of 10n squared, we need to decide if we're going to use 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Which one do we want to use? Okay. Well, for our other 10, well, we have the factors of 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Which one do we want to try using? Which one would go first? 5, and the next one would be 2. We can't have it the other way around because then we would have greatest common factors in both of them of 2 and 5. And last but not least, we can check this here. 2n times negative 2 is negative 4n. Negative 5 times 5n is negative 25n, which would give us negative 29n. Which is exactly what we wanted. So that right there is the correct answer. Any questions on any of this here? Any questions on this one here? Okay. If not, that is it for this here.